What's up everybody, it's your boy Ember from Ember Productions, and welcome back to another discussion video. As you can probably tell from the title, we are discussing what if Cinder was a protagonist in RWBY. For those of you who have been to my channel before and have remembered from a while back, I actually posted another part to the scenario that was supposed to essentially be the prologue setting up and doing all the table setting for the scenario. Since then, two things have happened. Firstly, I realized that part was absolute dog water in the way I set it up. Secondly, me and a friend of mine had actually made a power scale to use for RWBY What Ifs. Now, I am planning to make a separate video going over the power levels of RWBY, but so far we only have volumes 1 through 4 done and we're going into volume 5. The reason I feel comfortable making this video without the completed scale is because I'm only going into volume 1 and a little bit before that, and only one power level actually changes, that being Cinder's. To explain why I decided to retcon the first part, I really want to try to keep most of the what if scenarios grounded like it's something that could have actually been considered in the writing process instead of just pulling something out of my ass or making it sound like a fan fiction. There is some scenarios that are going to come off as that. There's one I actually have planned for next April Fools, but that's going to wait until then, and I want to build up a bit more believable scenarios. Just before we get started, I will say that in some scenarios, I will introduce a new character like an OC, and that's mainly to fill a role. In this scenario, that is the case, but there's only one or two being introduced, mainly to fill the role of Cinder being the villain, and the rest of the time, they're used to support the main cast. They may have some emphasis in the what if scenario, but they don't overtake the main cast as the main characters. Also along the lines with the power scaling rules, I will explain them when they come up, but they'll also be explained in the video when I make the power scaling videos. But with all that said, let's get into this. Let's spark some discussion. To start off the scenario proper, we have to go back to Cinder's backstory. So we gotta go back to Atlas. In particular, we have to go back to Cinder's backstory. Back to when she was with her adopted family and Rhodes. Both in the main timeline and in this scenario, Rhodes ends up meeting Cinder and decides to train her so she can become a huntress. The difference between the two timelines is that in the original timeline, when Rhodes gives Cinder her weapon, she ends up murdering her adoptive family and subsequently Rhodes. And that would lead down the road for Cinder to become literally the fucking worst. Now you may be wondering, how does this change from the normal timeline? Well, what changes is what Cinder decides to do. Going into the new scenario, Cinder still does murder her adoptive family, and subsequently Rhodes. But what changes is her emotions afterwards. Instead of having an immediate feeling of power, she has a much different emotion, shock. This would be immediately followed by fear and just sadness overall. In this timeline, Cinder and Rhodes would have a slightly closer relationship, a bit less of mentor and student and more like a father figure to her. While obviously we wouldn't see this at the beginning of the show, when we would eventually see it later down the line, Rhodes could be shown in various scenes, giving more emotional support to Cinder. This would foster their relationship more, as well as foster more of an emotional reaction from Cinder, outside of her just gaining bloodlust. While Cinder wouldn't have much regret for killing her adoptive family, she feels genuinely sad and genuinely fearful for what she had done to Rhodes. So fearful, that Cinder actually flees from the scene. For a time, Cinder actually isolates herself and flees from Atlas. While she doesn't really have a place to go, she can think of one place: Vale. Her reasoning for this is that she can't really stay in Atlas because there could be authorities after her. She can't go back to Mistral because someone could recognize her, and she would basically just end up back in the orphanage and or arrested. And Vacua was a bit too close for Mistral for her comfort. For out of necessity for distance, Cinder chooses Vale to stay. During this time, Cinder has a lot of internal debate, mainly with what she wants to do. She considers turning herself in, but she really doesn't want to rot in prison, so she starts to come up with more ideas. She ponders the idea of becoming a huntress and applying a beacon, but she's still uncertain about being able to maintain anonymity. Then she starts to think more about Rhodes. In her mind, she thinks Rhodes would want her to do either of the two options. Either turn herself in and do the right thing so she could face consequences, or to become a huntress like he wanted her to. She starts erring more and more to one side, mainly because she wants to see the vision that Rhodes had set out for her. She felt like becoming a huntress and trying to add some good to the world, she'd be doing right by him, and attempting to atone for what she had done. And with that in mind, Cinder decides to apply to Beacon, though she has to wait to get accepted. During this time, Cinder would pick up a few odd jobs, mainly so she could get by. Some of this is just working as a vigilante, some of this is working as a mercenary, just basic things to help out and make money along the way. Depending on the timeline and how long it took her to get to Vale, this could range from a few months to a couple of years. While we don't get an exact age for Cinder, it's assumed that during her flashback, she was somewhere between the age of 10 at the start and age 15 by the end. Depending on how Cinder got to Vale and what way she traveled, this could mean she could only have a few months or a couple of years at most. During this time, Cinder is actually gaining a lot of experience that she would need to become a huntress. And this is the part where I can finally start talking about the power scaling. Hell yeah! Now, in the original timeline, Cinder would have a power level of about 60 by this point, after training with Rhodes. Rhodes' power level was actually 80, but the reason he had lost to Cinder was because he didn't actually want to kill Cinder or hurt her, so he was holding back, which gave Cinder the opening to kill him. In Volume 1, which is approximately 10 years after this moment, Cinder's base power level has reached 90, but with half the main power absorbed, her power level shoots up to 190. In this timeline, after a year of training and experience in Veil, her power level is shot up to 72.5. This may not seem like much compared to future Cinder, but given context to the averages, it's actually quite a bit. The average Huntsman student has a power level of about 20 to 40. The average Huntsman has about 40 to 60. Advanced Huntsmen are usually somewhere between 60 and 80, like Rhodes. And Legendary Huntsmen, like Crow and Glinda, those usually get up to the upper hundreds. At this point, Cinder is stronger than most of the members of Team RWBY and Team Juniper in Volume 1. With this in mind, Cinder's gotten pretty damn strong for her age. So strong, in fact, that a certain person takes notice. During one of her usual odd jobs, she ends up encountering a hunter. The hunter had worn a red cape that matched his red eyes, along with black hair. He wielded a broadsword that was mechanical in design. Enter everyone's favorite drunk uncle, Crow. And that's where I'm going to leave things. I did want to get a bit further, I'm just a bit strapped for time at the moment, so the next episode will go further into Cinder's backstory before Volume 1 begins, and then we'll be doing Volume 1 as the third episode. But for now, thank you guys for watching this episode. I will see you in the next one. And if you have any suggestions, please leave them below, whether it be for this scenario or for a future scenario. Thank you guys for watching this episode. I will see you in the next one. And, oh, bye-bye!